Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor Sikkema, Carmen Vitali here with you guys to get you ready for week 8 in the NFL. This is our preview show for the week. And Carmen, the schedule's stacked this week. We've had a couple of bye weeks, over the last couple of weeks. Sometimes it's been 4 teams, sometimes it's been 2. No bye weeks in week 8. So it is a jam-packed schedule here. No London game, no Monday night doubleheader, just a straight up Thursday night, jam-packed Sunday, and then we get to one Monday night to end it all out. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I think I just blew your mind before we got on, but
I had no idea. So, Carmen, if you're listening audio only, well, you're gonna kind of feel left out here. She's got a sweet Arizona State Devils jersey on, baseball jersey on, and right before we hit record, she was like, "Did you know that women's button-up clothing and men's button-up clothing are like the opposite sides?" And it completely blew my mind. I had no idea that this was a thing.
I don't know why it's a thing, because it's not as if like women and men have different dominant hands. Usually, like there are left-handers, there are right-handers. It's not gender specific, but all men's clothing and things that zipper up and stuff, it's on the opposite side. So I'm used to going like right over left to button, and men's clothing is left over right. And so when I have to put men's clothing on, which I've done my entire life because I was a huge tomboy growing up, it's hard for me, and I was like struggling with the button, and I didn't want Trevor to think I was stupid. But I'm like I don't know how to button clothing. But like it's harder. It's so much harder. And I mean, I don't expect a lot of guys to know that, because it's not like they're dressing up in women's clothing. If that's your thing, no judgment. But
sure,
but usually that's just not how it works. But women have had to grapple with the fact that they have to then, if they want to wear jerseys or whatever it is that are men's sizes and all that other stuff, that we have to button it the opposite way that we're used to.
The second that this show gets done, I'm going to do the deepest dive into the clothing industry, going like all the way back to the 1600s to figure out how we got to this point where the buttons are on opposite and on opposite sides of the shirt. Like, yeah. I can't understand it. It's blowing my mind. We do have a show to get through though. And I'm going to try to get through it. At some point in time. If anybody says the phrase, well, let's see if this defense can really push this quarterback's buttons, I'm going to have PTSD, and you're immediately going to lose me. So you're going to have to take over that segment if that's what happens. So I'm just warning you in advance. We're going to talk about a lot of different PFF statistics here on the show. We're going to give you a matchup that matters for every single game. We'll give you a plus factor as well. If you guys want to follow along at home and basically do your own research outside of this show, either before or after, you can do so by getting a PFF Plus subscription over at PFF.com. You can see all the great premium stats, but it's so much more than that. You can link up our statistics with your fantasy football league, and you have an optimizer tool that you use to set your lineup. Once we get to free agency, we've got a lot of values and free agency projections that you can see. And then, of course, draft season, my bread and butter. You get the fully unlocked mock draft simulator, you get the draft guide, you get basically everything that we have to offer. So it is a full year-long advantage to have a PFF Plus subscription, and you can get one right now over at PFF.com. Carmen, we got the Vikings and the Rams here on Thursday Night Football, and we're recording this on a Thursday, so obviously there are some late scratches that could happen here, which are heavily involved in this game, because we've got Cooper Kupp potentially coming back. It looks like he is going to play. Puka Nacua is kind of like, okay, they're leaning towards him playing, but we'll see once we get down to game time. It's a Vikings team that's coming off a really tough loss, a close loss against the Detroit Lions. And it's a Rams team that could be the best version of the Rams that we have seen so far this season as they have gone through injuries. What do you think the matchup that matters here most for this game? What do you got?
I go straight to the trenches with something like this, because I think this Rams team, when you've been talking about the last few weeks when Cooper Kupp has been out and Puka Nacua has been out, and this offense really just hasn't been what we're used to seeing from Sean McVay and the Rams and Matthew Stafford, you look at the defensive side of the ball, and the strength of this team has been this defensive line. And so I go Rams defensive line against Minnesota's offensive line, which is, again, one of the best offensive lines in football, has one of the best left tackles in football, which is Christian Darrisaw, 79.3 PFF grade there. And he manhandled some of these Lions defenders last week. And yes, they're without Aiden Hutchinson, but that doesn't mean that there still wasn't a ton to account for. They were doing all sorts of different stunts up front. It was very different than what we had seen from the Lions when they had Aiden Hutchinson in, which, their entire defensive front kind of revolved on getting Aiden Hutchinson one-on-one matchups. That was not the case this time. So Christian Darrisaw was all over the place and trying to, he's doing spin moves and he just showing off that athleticism that makes him one of the best left tackles in football. And so now he's going to be going up against a Rams defensive line that I think is highlighted this year by Jared Verse, the rookie who has the highest pressure rate in the league right now at 23.6%. So this is a strength on strength type of matchup. And I think it's going to determine a lot when you're talking about how much, these quarterbacks have time to get the ball off and to operate these offenses. I'm going trenches.
Now, I'm going with the trenches as well, and I think that's a good shout out on that side of the ball, but I'll go to the other side of the ball. I'm going to talk about the Rams offensive line, specifically versus the blitz. When we've talked about the Rams offensive line, they've gone through a lot of injuries. Really, week one is when, unfortunately, a lot of those starters started to go out with injury, and I feel like over the last 6-7 weeks, we've kind of just in our head thought, man, this Rams offensive line is just not going to be very good given the injuries that they have gone through. But I will say, over the last couple of weeks, if you haven't really been paying too much attention to it, they have been playing better over the last 4 weeks specifically. So I think that's a decent enough stretch of time. It's not necessarily like, oh, it's just a 2-week stretch or something like that. 4 games. So over the last month, 69.5 team blocking grade in that time span. That's not too bad. Yeah, again, PFF grades, they're different than grades that you would get in school. People look at, the grades in the 60s and they go like, oh, that's terrible. It's a D+. That means they're really bad. Not necessarily. I feel like grades in the mid 60s are kind of like, okay, you're doing your job adequately. So this is even a little bit better than that. They've got a 60.5 team blocking grade versus the blitz over the last 4 weeks, which I think is very topical for this matchup going up against Brian Flores' defense, because the only defense in the NFL that blitzes more than the Minnesota Vikings are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Todd Bowles, Brian Flores, sort of cut from the same cloth in that regard. They want to pressure you all night long. And so that's what they're going to do. That's what the Vikings are going to do. They're going to blitz. And the Rams really haven't been terrible against the blitz. I thought I was going to look up these numbers and say, oh boy, it's going to be a long day at the office for the Rams offensive line. But they really haven't been that bad at it. And Matthew Stafford, been in this league a long time. He understands where blitzes are coming from. He understands where the ball needs to go, when he needs to throw hot, things like that. So that to me is a major matchup that matters, because the Rams aren't as bad as you think against the blitz. We know that's what the Vikings are going to do. And if they can hold up well, I'm already peeking at your plus factor here. I know who you have here, and I think that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that could be a big difference with those guys in the game versus the blitz especially.
Yeah, but what is so tough about Brian Flores' defense is that you don't necessarily know where the pressure is coming from. They lead the league in unblocked pressures, which is absolutely insane given the fact that everybody knows the reputation of his defense at this point. It's just that he's really, really good at simulating pressures, at bringing different guys to the line, and then dropping guys that you just don't expect to drop. And that's why, he has a chess piece in Andrew Van Ginkel that can drop into coverage, but he can be part of the pass rush. That's the difficulty here. It's what Jared Goff did so well last week, and you're going to need to see Matthew Stafford the same so that he can get the ball to my plus factors, which are the most obvious plus factors when you're talking about this Rams team. And that's getting Cooper Kupp back and potentially Puka Nacua. Like you said, we don't know the status of him quite yet. He is questionable coming into this game. There hasn't been anything as of this recording saying whether or not he's actually going to play. But even if it's just Cooper Kupp that's coming back, that should get this offense going that just really hasn't so far. Matthew Stafford this season among quarterbacks, 56.5 PFF grade, which ranks 30th. That's not what we're used to seeing out of Matthew Stafford. And you really need to get this going via the pass, get some chunk plays. And what Cooper Kupp can do so well is you isolate Cooper Kupp in those one-on-one matchups, and then Matthew Stafford targeting single coverage. 502 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's got about a 50% completion rate on that right now. That should go up when you get a guy like Cooper Kupp back.
It's always tough to navigate sentences when the name Cooper Kupp is in there.
It's hard.
It is really, it's a tongue twister in and of itself. My plus factor in this one, one of us had to talk about obviously the Rams receivers that were coming back. And obviously there's a lot of things that the Vikings are doing well. Feels like we're kind of light on Vikings analysis here in this one, but yes, we know the Vikings are a really good football team. They're one of the best football teams in the NFL. I think their resume to this point kind of speaks for itself. My plus factor, though, is Kyren Williams. And again, one of us had to talk about the receivers because it is an obvious plus factor in this one. But so is Kyren Williams because to me, he has been the steady presence within this offense. Whether they've had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua going back to last year, or even just this year, needing to get something on offense. He's got a 9-game consecutive touchdown streak, which is one shy of the NFL record set by Greg Bell. So if he gets another rushing touchdown in this game, that will tie the NFL record there. And that just goes to show you how consistent this guy has been. So yes, I think everybody's going to talk about Matthew Stafford and these receivers coming back because it is a big deal. But make no mistake, it's not just the fact that these two wide receivers are back and then they're going to completely abandon the run. They're absolutely not. Kyren Williams is a major part of what this team does on the ground and just their offensive philosophy overall. And that needs to continue to be the case because if the Vikings can really stop Kyren Williams, then even with two great receivers coming back, when you become one-dimensional like that, it's really tough to move the ball no matter what. So to me, Kyren still needs to be the guy that they've been able to lean on through the first 7 weeks of the season. So he is my plus factor in this game. Going to the 1 p.m. games on Sunday because we don't have an overseas game here this week after 3 straight. Ravens, Browns. I want to start with this one. No Deshaun Watson this one. He is out for the season with an Achilles tear. Jameis Winston starting this game. Ravens coming off a huge Monday night road victory against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Big sad for the two people who are co-hosting the show. All right, so what do you think the matchup that matters is here for this one, Carmen?
I'm going to go again with kind of more of an obvious one, but one that is going to shift this game one way or the other. And it's how the Cleveland linebacking core does against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, because they are running the ball as expected at the best clip in the league. You got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK. You've got Jordan Hicks now in Cleveland. They have to contain Lamar Jackson. And it's not just because of what they can gain on the ground, but it's what this offense can gain overall when you have the run game working so well. Lamar Jackson is really, really good off play action. 47 of 64, 635 yards this season, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And that is a huge component to what they want to do offensively to get some of those chunk plays. And it's something that is set up by the fact that they run the ball so well. So you have to respect it. Every time that he fakes the handoff, you have to treat it as if he could actually hand the ball off to Derrick Henry because he does it so often. So this is something that completes their offense. It makes them so multidimensional. It makes them so hard to beat. And it's something that Lamar Jackson is so, so good at. Lamar Jackson currently, too, second in passing EPA. He's second in EPA per dropback. That is an incredible clip. What Lamar Jackson is doing right now can't be overstated. I mean, he won MVP last year, and he is playing better football than he played last year already through 7 weeks of the season. So this is something you have to be able to contain both of them. And I think containing them specifically is going to fall on those Cleveland linebackers, but it's going to be an entire multi-level defensive effort to try and stop this offense that is just rolling with Lamar, with Derrick, and under Todd Monken, who is unlocking all of this.
I mean, you are so right. Lamar is more efficient this year than he was last year, and that's terrifying because he came away with the most valuable player trophy last season. So anytime that a guy can even ascend above that level, you're talking about one of the best in the NFL, and it feels like Lamar is playing that way. My matchup that matters, going back to, I made a little joke about, the Ravens getting a big win down in Tampa and that kind of being to our chagrin because you used to work for the Buccaneers. I used to cover them as a beat reporter for Pewter Report. When we were down there at the same time, Jameis Winston was the quarterback. And we know Jameis Winston's passing nature here. He likes to push the ball deep down the field. And I think that is now the matchup that matters in this one, because when you look at the contrast between what this Browns offense was with Deshaun Watson through the first 7 weeks and then what it might be with Jameis Winston, they are very different in that area. Browns, 5.3 yards per attempt average through the first 7 weeks. Just a 7.5 average depth of target. Jameis's career average, 7.7 yards per attempt and over 10 average depth of target. So this is just a different quarterback. Jameis is fearless when it comes to throwing the ball deep down the field. He doesn't even really care who his receivers are. Now, he had good ones when he was in Tampa, when he put up a lot of these numbers, with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Cam Brate, a lot of different wide receivers to throw and just receiving options to throw the ball to. But Jameis sort of is who he is when it comes to his play style. He's going to want to push the ball deep down the field. And so that alone is a very interesting part of this, particularly because, and I highlighted this last week, the Ravens have not been good at defending the deep ball this year. 29.6 coverage grade as a team when defending passes of 10 or more yards down the field. So the Browns are kind of in this position now with Ken Dorsey taking over as a play caller for Kevin Stefanski, where they're almost like, what do we have to lose at this point, right? Deshaun's gone for the season. The year's not going the way that we thought. We're not as strong of a football. Our offensive line, no longer a big strength of the team. It's almost like they're kind of playing with nothing to lose, and they're playing with house money here. So I think that with Jameis's nature here as a passer, it's just going to look so different than it has in the past. And it's going up against a matchup where they could really take advantage of that when it comes to passing it deep down the field. Who is your plus factor in this one?
It goes along with what we were talking about before, what I was talking about before, which is, again, just limiting this Ravens offense. And it's how Myles Garrett can affect or disrupt Lamar, even if he's not getting sacks, because Lamar can get himself out of pressure. Can you disrupt his timing, given how well Lamar Jackson is doing passing the ball down the field? Myles Garrett is the strength of this team. It's going to be very interesting to see if Cleveland ends up being maybe a seller in all of this. And, the rumors have started to swirl about what can you get for Myles Garrett. You can probably get a pretty good haul that's going to set you up in the future. But I mean, this is the guy that has the second best PFF pass rushing grade at 93. He's got 27 pressures so far this year, which is tied for 12th. And among edge defenders, tied for third again in pass rushing grade too. So this is one of those things where he's the elite guy. He's the strength. What can he do to really disrupt what Lamar is going to try to do? He's probably going to be going up against Ronnie Stanley on that offensive line. And the Ravens offensive line, I mean, we haven't really talked about it quite yet. And I think everybody doesn't really think about it because of the fact that Lamar Jackson can get himself out of some sticky situations given how mobile he is. But this is a really good offensive line. And it's one that we were concerned about coming into the season because it took some losses to free agency and otherwise. And now they are playing really good ball right now, whether that's blocking for Derrick Henry in the run game or whether that's protecting Lamar. It's one of the reasons why Lamar's passing numbers are up, and we need to kind of give some credence to that. So that specific matchup, maybe that could have been the matchup that matters too. There's a lot of matchups in this game.
No, there are absolutely. And I think that to your point, like moving Patrick McCarry from the right tackle spot, you move him inside, he's playing better as that left guard. You have Roger Rosengarten in there. So you liked him, drafting him in the third round, and now he's able to play along with this offensive line. And I think that's, to your point, it's a really good shout out because at the beginning of the year, the Ravens offensive line was really struggling. And now they've sort of shifted some players in and out, and it feels like this five that they have out there is the correct five in the correct order in the correct spots, and they're playing better than they have before. My plus factor in this one, I'm going to go with Denzel Ward because Ward had an elite coverage grade last week against the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got an elite coverage grade in single coverage situations overall this season. He is playing very, very well this year, and he'll have the chance to go up against Zay Flowers a lot in this game. Now, the reemergence of Mark Andrews in this offense to make the tight end weapons as deep and as dangerous as possible definitely goes into this. But Zay Flowers is still the top target player on this team. He is still the highest threat percentage when it comes to wide receiver usage. They are going to him all the time whenever they are passing the football. And so I think we're going to get quite a bit of Denzel Ward on Zay Flowers, and it's basically hey, strength on strength, your best guy against our best guy, who's going to come out on top. It's why I think that if they can, I don't want to say shut down Zay Flowers, but really limit Zay Flowers in this passing game, then all of a sudden your matchup that matters of, okay, the run defense and the linebacker matchup against Lamar Jackson and King Henry, that sort of becomes the true matchup that matters. And it's like, wow, okay, whoever wins that is going to win this football game, outside of the chats talking about, hey, Jameis can throw for 4 touchdowns. He can throw for 4 interceptions. You just don't know which version you're going to get from him. So sure. To me, Jameis Winston, the most entertaining ticket in sports, basically has been since he was been in the league. Yes. Now we're getting him to start a game again.
As long as you don't actually have skin in the game.
Right. And yeah, if you do, it's nervous as hell. And I don't recommend it. It's an emotional experience. Okay, let's go to Tennessee Titans at the Detroit Lions. Lions coming off a big win against the Minnesota Vikings. It's it's sort of a situation where if you believe in trap games, if you believe in those emotional letdowns, you're riding high off a big win last week. Titans come into town, you're hosting them. Not like they've played very well this season. Could be a team that you easily overlook if you are into that sort of thing. I don't know if Dan Campbell coach group is going to be, but what do you think here? What's the matchup that matters in this game?
Well, it's Sonic and Knuckles, otherwise known as Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, against this Tennessee run defense, which is actually pretty good on the season. Fourth lowest EPA per play allowed against the run, second most tackles for loss or no gain against the run as well. So that's something that Tennessee does pretty well on defense. But then you have this dynamic duo that again has a video game, nicknames for themselves. But what's really interesting too is that, I mean, these guys, first of all, you're running behind one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in football in Detroit. Sixth best run blocking grade for those guys. And then between the two of these guys, they have 22 rushes gaining over 10 yards. So they are perfectly capable of being explosive, albeit in different ways, right? David Montgomery is kind of this bowling ball, the Knuckles of all of it, where he's going to go north-south, he's going to go inside, and he's just going to bully you. And then you have Jahmyr Gibbs, more of the finesse guy, more of the guy they try to get into space because he has the vision on the field, and it's only getting better. I mean, this is a guy that's in his second year and has already looked like he's been playing forever, just given how he looks when he's running and how much he can see the field as he's running. I mean, he knows his cutback lanes, but he just has this incredible vision. The third highest EPA per play on the ground between those two. So it's something that the Detroit likes to hammer, and they are so good at tailoring their offense to what the opponent's weaknesses are, and that's not necessarily, Tennessee, which is better against the run. I fully expect this to be a heavy passing game for Jared Goff, but I do think that getting these guys going is really just going to overwhelm the Tennessee defense as a whole if you can get all of these different weapons kind of working together on offense in Detroit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the spread's double digits in this one, which you don't often see in the NFL. It's a game that Detroit should absolutely win at home. A matchup that I think that matters is maybe more of a long-term thing. Jameson Williams is going to miss the next 2 games due to suspension. And even though it's just 2 games, right, he's going to come back and he's going to be on the team. I'm interested to see over the next 2 weeks what this Lions offense looks like explosively without him. Because when you look at the Lions offense and players that have caught passes of 15 yards or more this season, Amon-Ra St. Brown's number 1, as you would probably expect. He's got 12. And then it's Jameson Williams with 8. And then we got Sam Laporta at 5, Tim Patrick at 5, Khalif Raymond at 4. And then you got the running backs each that you mentioned there. They have 3 apiece. So, Jameson Williams being number 2 on this team at catching the deep ball, and certainly his speed and that being the type of player that he is, that's an element that they like to mix into the offense, as we have seen many times before with the Lions and how they kind of construct their plays. There's always a reason for everything. It's not like they're just having random wide receivers go out there and run random concepts. I think it really complements not only players individually, the types of routes that they want them to run, but also complements the rest of the offense, the rest of the flow, the rest of the play design. And so with Jameson Williams out, can this team stay explosive? Do we still get that explosiveness within their offense? And so I obviously think that's a matchup that matters for this one, but I think it's also a matchup that matters for next week and the week after and the rest of the season. How diverse is this passing attack, and how explosive can it be when it loses one of its major speed components in Jameson Williams? So that's something that I'm looking out for in this game. I see we have the same plus factor here, Calvin Ridley for the Tennessee Titans. I'll just start with Calvin Ridley. Titans are last in passing yards this season with 997 through 7 weeks. I mean, it's just not good. Ridley, what was this, 2 weeks ago, where he didn't have a single target in the first half, and he was obviously upset about it, understandably so. You pay him a lot of money, you bring him over, you want to get this guy some targets, especially when the team is losing. It's never easy to not get the ball as a star receiver, especially when your team is losing. You're going to want to have the ball more because you think you could help the team out. Now they don't have DeAndre Hopkins. So now it literally is Calvin Ridley. Now it is, okay, you are going to get the lion's share of everything here, and he has to be a plus factor because this group was already bad with DeAndre Hopkins. And it felt like they had no chemistry of how to get the ball to their receivers, whether it was Mason Rudolph or Will Levis out there. It's now Calvin Ridley's show. He is the wide receiver that this whole passing attack has to run through. Does it become more streamlined or does it become more limited? It's going to be one of the two, and that's a factor that I think we got to watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Is can you get this passing offense going, and can you do it when Calvin Ridley is going to be paid attention to even more so than he was before? And can he get those contested catches? Can he be the guy that we all wanted him to be, even in Jacksonville, as being that wide receiver one, and you know, coming back from the suspension for the season, and then it just never really panned out quite yet. And you hope that that's still there, but Tennessee is going to have to figure out a way to do that. And I mean, that does hinge on their quarterbacks being able to pass the ball down the field, whoever it ends up being. But then it's this offensive line that needs to protect well. And there's not a whole lot that's working on offense, although you do have the offensive line gurus in Tennessee, which I thought was going to translate into a lot more than it already has. So that's, yeah, I mean, same plus factor, because that's Tennessee's only hope at this point for offense in general, is to just start passing the ball down the field. And can you rely on Calvin Ridley for that?
Colts Texans divisional matchup here is the next game that I want to get to. CJ Stroud and the Texans, coming off a loss where not a lot was going right on the offensive side of the ball. It was a close game with the Green Bay Packers, and it was a really good game. Very clearly, two of the top 8, 5, whatever you want to say, teams in the NFL, just two really good football teams. And Packers come out on top, but it was a tough day at the offense for the Houston Texans overall.
See what you did there. See what you did there.
There you go. You see the vision. The Colts now going to Houston. How do we feel about this one? What's the matchup that matters here for either the Texans to bounce back or the Colts to continue their winning ways this season?
Well, judging from what was so successful for the Green Bay Packers last week against the Texans, I think it's this Indianapolis 4-man rush versus the Houston O-line and CJ Stroud, because what was so interesting about what Jeff Hafley and the Green Bay defense did against CJ Stroud was they were able to get him with a lot of simulated pressures. They didn't actually blitz him very often. Stroud was only blitzed on 17% of the plays that he was pressured on in Green Bay. And that is kind of what threw him for a loop. And that's what was so effective. It wasn't the blitz or even actual pressure. It was just what they were threatening to do. So that's something that maybe can be used as a blueprint. And whether that was more of the fault of the offensive line kind of being spooked by it, or CJ Stroud, which I tend to think it's the former, because I do believe in CJ Stroud. And I just think that, again, we're still talking about a second-year player here. Maybe, he needs a little bit more experience against seeing, the tells of certain guys that end up blitzing and all that other stuff. But I think Indianapolis can be very effective if you just kind of threaten the blitz or threaten pressure, because it worked out for Green Bay so much this last game. And whether that was a chess match or not on the behalf of Jeff Hafley, we'll get to that when we get to Green Bay's game. But I think that is a way that Indianapolis could potentially be successful.
Yeah, it felt like when I was rewatching that Texans game. Yeah, I mean, CJ's statistics weren't great in that game, but he wasn't missing by much.
No,
he was missing by a little, but it was a lot of stuff was still there for him to complete passes and play well. I think it was like that Josh Allen game where he was 9 for 30, where you go, okay, well, basically everything that could not have gone well in that game just didn't. The ball did not bounce their way at all. I think CJ will be fine, and I think we'll be good to go here. I'm really interested to see how they bounce back, particularly when it comes to the deep passing game. And that's my matchup that matters here. It's the Texans wide receivers and the deep passing game versus the Colts cornerbacks in this one. CJ Stroud, 71.1 passing grade on passes of 15 yards or more over the last 2 weeks. So 71.1, 87.7 on those same throws weeks 1 through 5. Now, what's the difference here? Nico Collins. Nico Collins was in there for the first 5 weeks of the season, and CJ Stroud was a damn near elite passer when it came to throws 15 yards or more. Without Nico Collins over the last 2 games, he just has not been as confident opening it up and really succeeding with those deep passes. When you look at the Colts, Samuel Womack, 85.1 overall grade this season. Kenny Moore, 81.1. Jalen Jones, a 70.0. But I think Jalen Jones, it's been more up and down, but he has had performances where he has been really strong this season. So you've got a nice trio of corners here for the Indianapolis Colts, which I did not think that I would be saying going into the season. So kudos to them. They're playing really, really well. They have become a strength of this defense, in my opinion. It's a really tough test, but it is one without Nico Collins. So to me, this is a big like Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell game as well, where those guys got to show up even more so than what we have seen previously with Nico Collins' absence, because it is very clearly felt in this offense, particularly when you look at them pushing the ball deep down the field in the passing game. But what's your plus factor here for this one?
Again, another obvious one, which is Jonathan Taylor returned to the practice field this week. He was practicing on Thursday, or Wednesday, I believe it was. I don't know if he's practicing again today, but if he returns to this Colts offense, that can just be a huge catalyst for production in general. We know what Jonathan Taylor is capable of, both on the ground and as a receiver out of the backfield. And he's got 11 rushes gaining 10 or more yards, 4 rushes gaining 20 or more yards this year. So that's something that you need. You need him back. This offense cannot be productive, I don't think, without Jonathan Taylor. And that's the thing that is the definition of a plus factor, I suppose.
I agree with you completely. I think it has to be Jonathan Taylor, who's been dealing with that ankle injury the whole season. And to me, I don't necessarily have concrete numbers to back it up, but it's just too feast or famine for this offense without the Jonathan Taylor. I think they have wanted Anthony Richardson to shoulder a little bit more of the offensive load since he has come back, and Jonathan Taylor has been in and out, not really been in there. He's just not consistent enough. And so you're hoping that these deep passes from Anthony Richardson you can basically hit home runs enough to win the football game. And there's just not enough of an in-between. And when Jonathan Taylor is out there, I feel like the efficiency there is so much higher. There's less pressure on Richardson to have to hit those deep passes. And instead, they're the mainstay of the game plan, not like the complementary part of the game plan. So I agree with you completely. Jonathan Taylor has to be the plus factor in this game because there's just not enough balance on this offense, in my opinion, without him. And it's a situation where they're going up against a Houston Texans team that is looking to bounce back in a big way after a tough loss against Green Bay. So they're going to get Houston's best, and I don't know if they can really keep up in this game if Jonathan Taylor isn't the Jonathan Taylor we know he could be, even with him dealing with that ankle injury. Before we get to the next game, got to mention that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Think of a time recently when maybe you could not be yourself. You were wearing a mask, a costume, right? It's October, Halloween. It's a time for masks and costumes, but those are for Halloween. They're not supposed to be for your everyday life, right? At work and social situations around your family. Some people feel like they cannot be their full selves if they are wearing a mask, they're wearing a costume. It's not really what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be confident every day, no matter what you're going through, or at least that you can handle the things that you need to handle when you're going through them. Therapy is a really great way to be able to do that. I've been doing therapy for over a year and a half, and that's what it has been. It has shown me, hey, these are the strengths that I naturally have. How can we help those shine a little bit more in every single day life? And then these are the things that maybe you struggle with, maybe that you could be a little bit better with, and things you got to think about. But all in all, it makes you feel confident about who you are and where you're going. The journey and having that confidence to be the person that you could be. Therapy is a really great, useful tool to better understand how your mind works, become more aware of your own patterns, behaviors, and how to improve them. It's not just for people who are going through something specific. It can be a great tool for that, right? If you need to talk to somebody about something in particular, therapy is great for that, but it can be so much more. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is convenient, it's flexible, it's an entirely online way to get therapy that is right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You take off the mask and the costumes with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/PFF to get 10% off your first month with them. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. Rolling along with the 1 o'clock games here. Packers Jags. This one's in Jacksonville. I feel like Green Bay's riding high. Jacksonville, I guess, is kind of too, coming off of a back-to-back back-to-back weeks in London where first game, not so great. Second game, they really took care of business. They're at least playing the best ball that we have seen them play so far this season. So they're coming off of a big win. Both of these teams are. What do we think is going to happen in this one? What's the matchup that matters, Carmen?
Yeah, it's got to be Brian Thomas Jr. against Jair Alexander. I think that's the most exciting one anyway. BTJ just continues to be the bright spot for this Jacksonville offense, for this Jacksonville team, especially, before they got that other win under their belt in London. 78.7 PFF grade, which ranks 14th among wide receivers, but 513 receiving yards, 6th among receivers, 193 yards after the catch. That's the big thing here, is he is just one of those guys that Trevor Lawrence can depend on to make him look good. 4 receiving touchdowns, which is tied for 7th. This is the big thing, though, with him, is the throws over 20 plus yards. He has 6 catches for over 20 yards. That's tied for 3rd. 283 yards total on catches like that, 4th, and then 2 receiving touchdowns, which is tied for 6th of 20 or more yards. So this is the guy that you use to push the ball down the field. This is the number one guy you need, that Trevor Lawrence is targeting right now. This is the guy that you need to stop if you're Green Bay's offense, or defense rather. And that should be the responsibility of Jair Alexander. He is not shy about saying he wants to go against teams' number 1 wide receivers. That was something that he was really adamant about last week. The whole Stephon Diggs, Jair Alexander, whatever you want to call that pregame, scruffle, kerfuffle, all of the fun little words for a little dust up that continues throughout the whole game.
Dust up's a good one. I like that.
Dust up, yeah. It was very chippy. And like the whole teams, like both teams got involved in that. And so that's the kind of effect that Jair has. Do I think that he's going to pick that fight with a rookie? I don't know. I don't think there's as much bad blood built up between him and BTJ. But that doesn't change the fact that this is the guy that you're going to have to shut down if you're Green Bay's defense.
I thought it was hilarious that Stephon was like, I'll never be the bigger man.
Oh,
absolutely.
I loved it. I am so pro petty, Trevor. Like, absolutely. He's like, I'm never going to go high. I'm always going to be.
I know. It's so hilarious hearing him say those words, because we're always told, like, hey, be the bigger person, be the bigger man, like whatever it is. And it's just, and he just goes, I'll never be the bigger man. He just,
I won't. Don't try me. And I adore it. I really do.
Look, I don't know if Jair is going to sort of give BTJ, like you said, like that sort of, treatment, but Jair's going to talk.
He always talks. So, even when he's not involved in the play. That's
100%. 100%. I did think it was hilarious. Scott Hansen, who I do think obviously does a great job on Red Zone, they were previewing that game and they showed that little scuffle that was going on. And Scott was saying like, oh, like it's Stephon Diggs. And I think he's seeing the video for the first time, like as they had it on the screen. So he didn't know, like he hadn't seen it before. He didn't know which players were involved or anything. And you could see, obviously, one of them is Stephon Diggs. And then it was a sea of Green Bay Packers who were there.
Right. Steph was about to fight the whole team.
And he's like, Stephon Diggs getting into an altercation. You see, I think like Nixon, like he could literally just read the back of his jersey, like Nixon, he's right there. And he just goes, I'm sure Jair Alexander is in there. He didn't even see Jair Alexander. No. And he was just like, I'm just going to make a safe bet here and say that Jair Alexander is probably involved.
Dude,
but that's why.
There were multiple times in that game, too, where like it was a runner, like a running back, that it was Joe Mixon. And the defensive line stopped Joe Mixon, but Jair somehow is right there being like, yeah, what? And I'm like, you didn't do anything. You were standing there. You didn't do anything.
It's the beauty of being a corner. It really is. My matchup that matters in this one, we've talked a lot about the Jags' deep passing attack, and I think you're right. If the Jags are going to have success in the passing game, it's going to be through Brian Thomas Jr. What he does really well is he wins deep down the field. But I think through the first 5-6 weeks of the season, the Jags were sort of like we just talked about with the Colts, too reliant on that. They want to throw the ball deep, but you have to do the work to be able to open things up deep. It cannot just be that, because the completion percentage and the odds that you're going to win the football game with that as your main emphasis aren't good when you can't do the other things well. Jags ran the ball really well last week. Tank Bigsby had over 100 yards. He had a 4.5 yards per carry average. Dearness Johnson as well had above a 4.0 yards per carry average. So this team was moving the ball on the ground. And to me, that's when Jacksonville is good, when they are running the ball in a complementary, efficient fashion. They need to continue to do that. Now, this will be a game where I think the Packers are going to push them on the scoreboard. They're going to need to hit those big shots over the top and really be able to push the ball to match up with them. But it can't just be that. Your focus has to be, if you're Jacksonville, we want to run the ball well, because when they can do that, then everything else kind of ties into it. So when you look at the Jags, top 8 in EPA per rush and total rushing yards last week, and when they're going up against a Packers defense that is 25th in rushing grade at 56.1 and 18th in EPA per rush allowed this season. So the Packers have not been great at run defense this year, and it's a recipe for the Jags to have back-to-back really good games on the ground, which I think they're going to need. What's your plus factor in this game?
Well, Wes over at Packers.com did a wonderful story just kind of about what we were talking about earlier, where the simulated pressures that Jeff Hafley brought along that defensive front and how that affected CJ Stroud this last game, and what they tried to do to get pressure, which is something that Green Bay has struggled with so far this year. But what was so interesting too was Rashawn Gary you think, he's one of the highlights of this defense. You want to see more from him when it comes to pass rush production. And against Houston, instead of just kind of rushing Rashawn Gary on every play, he was used more as a decoy. And I think that this is where it comes in, where you can start to kind of play chess as a defensive coordinator, where, all right, you showed on tape with Houston that you're doing these simulated pressures. Rashawn Gary isn't always rushing. He's not always involved, all that other stuff. Now, against the Jags, now that you've put that on tape, bring Rashawn Gary. Hammer him off that edge every single play. Have him involved in the blitz. Do something kind of completely different than what you put on tape. And don't use Rashawn Gary as much as a decoy, because what Jacksonville's going to do when they're game planning here, they're going to identify that and say, hey, yeah, we don't actually have to worry about Rashawn Gary every time, because he didn't actually come most of the time. He was used as just kind of a way to get the quarterback's eyes away from guys that were coming, like Xavier McKinney, who got that sack on CJ Stroud. That was one of the things that Rashawn Gary set up in particular. Now, switch it up. And I'm going to be very interested to see if that's in fact what Jeff Hafley does. And I think that can be a huge plus factor because of how much you want to get out of Rashawn Gary, how much you know that he's capable of. With this kind of scheme shift, you haven't seen him fit in as well, I think, to the 4-3 that Jeff Hafley runs versus the 3-4 that they've run in Green Bay the past 15 years. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's where that kind of stuff starts to show up, is in your personnel, and are they equipped to handle kind of the way that those roles are differentiated in those base schemes, although base schemes are just so fluid these days. So it's not that matters necessarily. I'm just going to be very interested to see what Rashawn Gary is able to do and how productive he can potentially be against Jacksonville.
My plus factor is Jordan Love. And again, a little bit more of an obvious one here, but I think that it has to be, because in my opinion, I said this on the grades release show. I said it on the quarterback show when I was talking with Seth Galina about it. I think the Packers offense is ready to just take it to the moon. When you go back and you watch Jordan Love's games over the last couple of weeks in particular, he is fearless. There is not a throw that he is shy about making. He is extremely confident in that offense. He knows how to layer the throws. He's got a really good feel for touch throws and fastball throws, and how much air to put underneath each, and good chemistry with each of his receiving options, the tight ends included. And man, there are a few quarterbacks right now that are playing with more confidence than Jordan Love is. And sure, you see a little bit of the ups and downs. You see some of the turnover-worthy plays. But again, I went back, and over the last 2 weeks, I watched all those turnover-worthy plays. And yeah, okay, some of them you'd say to yourself, all right, you could maybe not put the ball in harm's way that much next time. But at the same time, Carmen, that's what playing the quarterback position is all about. Like, of course, we would love to have 0 turnover-worthy plays for our quarterbacks, but that's not this league. It's so competitive. You're going to throw turnover-worthy plays. I don't want the boneheaded decision turnover-worthy plays, but if you're giving your guy a chance and you're attempting a throw confidently and appropriately, right, I'm okay with that. It's part of playing the quarterback at the highest level. Jordan Love does that. And through the second half of last season, he was, I think, our number 3 graded quarterback. He was a top 5 quarterback in a lot of ways, top 3 quarterback in a lot of ways. I know he had an elite PFF passing grade during that time from week 10 on. We could very well be in for another second half explosion of the season from Jordan Love, given the hints of what we have already seen him play with this week. So to me, he's the big plus factor, because if he starts to turn into that player again, I don't think Jacksonville is going to be able to keep up.
I saw a meme on Twitter, and it was like, inside Jordan Love, there are 2 wolves, and they put Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers on either side, because that is exactly the kind of quarterback that Jordan Love is. I mean, you look at like Brett Favre. I grew up watching Brett Favre being in Chicago, and I mean, hating his guts for that matter. But he was absolutely fearless with the way that he threw the ball, and you kind of live by the sword, die by the sword, but you were living by the sword a lot more than you were dying with it, again, as someone who was rooting for the team going against him all the time. And then you have Aaron Rodgers, and I think you saw a lot of Aaron Rodgers towards the back half of last season in Jordan Love, where he was extraordinarily accurate, and he was a little bit more conservative, but very good with his receivers, had all of the trust in them. And I mean, you look at that play to Tucker Kraft this last week, the touchdown, I just like the audacity with which Jordan Love throws the ball is just incredible. And you don't get those plays if you don't take some risks. But I mean, it was one of those things where it went through the defender's hand, but was a laser to Tucker Kraft and could not have been thrown any millisecond later or earlier than it was. It was just so perfect. And that is what Jordan Love is so good at. It's incredible. He's so fun to watch. And I'm with you. I think that he could absolutely just go take off to the moon the rest of the season.
Let's go Cardinals Dolphins for the next 1 p.m. game that we're previewing here. Yeah. Cardinals feels like have been very up and down this season. The Dolphins have been very down, but getting Tua back. So the offense is going to be different. Tyreek Hill said that they're back. Like, the offense is back. It's been one of the least explosive offenses in the NFL without Tua Tagovailoa in the lineup. So I'm just curious, what is the main matchup that matters here for you, Carmen, in this game?
Yeah, I'm actually going to kind of to the other side of things. We'll get to Tua in a second, but that Miami front seven against Kyler Murray, and you've mentioned how this Cardinals offense has been up and down, and it kind of goes the way that Kyler Murray goes. The utilization of his legs this season is what has really kind of differentiated him. We know that this is the danger with Kyler Murray, and it's won Arizona some games. So he's got a 76.8 rushing grade, which is 5th among quarterbacks, and that's being top 5 against this crop of quarterbacks, where we see quarterbacks running more than we ever have before. That's impressive. And you have the overall grade is 7th in the league, so that's still top 10. And the Cardinals' 3 wins have come on performances where Kyler Murray has run the ball well. And I don't think that's obviously a coincidence. He has 12 rushes gaining 10 or more yards, which ranks second among quarterbacks, and he's actually tied with Bo Nix for the most rushes gaining 20 or more yards. He's had 5 of them. So this is something that Arizona has, I'm sure at this point, has identified that this is kind of the key to their success and to winning games. So how does the Miami front seven contend with that? How do they contain Kyler Murray on the ground specifically? Because that just seems to be what sways the win column for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you completely. I think that is the matchup that matters. It is what Kyler can be, because we've seen at times. Shoot, he had a 96.9 overall grade, and what was that, like week 2, week 3? And it's like that's going to be the highest single game quarterback grade that we've given all year long. And then beyond that, it's been very up and down for Kyler. And the 3 games in which he has rushed for the most yards, they are 3-0 in those games. That is where their 3 victories come from. And so I do think that's a massive matchup that matters, because when Kyler is able to get out of the pocket very confidently, that is where he starts to truly become that MVP type of player. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was breaking off. I thought you had a question. I was like, you can talk. Like, it's all right. Like, we don't, you don't have to raise your hand. Although I do appreciate you raising your hand. No, that was very funny that he gets cut
and he's like, I'm going to the house, man.
You love that kind of confidence. You really do from Kyler. Sure. And I think that it is, all jokes aside, very important for this team. They need Kyler to be that type of a player. I don't think they can just have him sit back and really be one-dimensional in his game as a pocket passer. Like, you've got him for a reason. I think you really need him involved in the run game. And to be fair, I think that they have done a good job at doing that. It's not just like, okay, the losses that they had, he hasn't had any rushing yards at all. He has had some, but very clearly it's the games in which he can become a game breaker and an X factor with his legs. That means all the difference in the world. So the Dolphins defending that, especially, with the beat up defensive line, I think is going to be very, very important in this one. And then I see we both have the same plus factor, and I think we have to, right? It's Tua Tagovailoa, and it looks like he is going to start in this game. Second straight day of practice, hasn't had any concussion systems. It's very simple. Week 1 and week 2, 71.1 passing grade as a team with 6 completions of 15 yards or more for this Miami Dolphins team. In weeks 3 through 7, where they have not had Tua in the lineup, a 51.4 passing grade as a team with just 9 completions of 15 yards or more. So in almost triple the time span from when Tua was starting those first 2 games, they have only 9 completions of 15 yards or more compared to 6. This has been one of the most least explosive offenses in the NFL with Tua out. Does it snap right back into place like Tyreek Hill said that it would? That's, of course, the major plus factor here.
Yeah, I mean, overall this season, the Dolphins ranked 30th or lower in so many major offensive statistics: passing yards, pressures allowed, completions gaining 20 or more yards. I mean, take your pick. The Dolphins offense just, quite frankly, hasn't been productive, and it's shown kind of the holes in this team building strategy when you didn't have a really good answer for if Tua were to get injured, and having the history that he does, that's kind of inexcusable by the front office. And then it also exposed just all of the holes that they had along the offensive line, which even with Tua, I just didn't think that they did enough along to fortify that offensive line. That you knew Teron Armstead is as good of a left tackle as he is. He's going to miss some time. You need more depth along that unit to protect your quarterback. And that's not something that the Miami Dolphins did this offseason, to my complete and utter shock. When you invest into as much as you did with that new contract, how you can't supplement it with a really good unit around him, I think is, again, kind of inexcusable. And the Dolphins got exposed when Tua went down for all of these deficiencies. I am obviously worried about Tua, but he is a grown man. This was his decision to make, to try and come back this soon, to not wear the Guardian cap, to do all of that kind of stuff. That's not for me to really judge, but it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how much Tua trusts himself. If he plays, kind of with that in mind. I don't know how you don't. But it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, obviously Tyreek Hill is talking really confidently, and for the Dolphins' offense's sake, I hope that he's right. But we're going to see.
We will see. I hope this game is 47-45. Like, I hope this is just absolute fireworks on both sides of the ball. That would be a ton of fun to watch on a game that I think a lot of people are overlooking.
Yeah.
New York Jets, New England Patriots. The next game that I want to look at here. Jets, they're in a tough spot, right? 2-5, currently in possession of the number 5 overall draft pick, but it continues to be, all right, they're all in. All right, this week, all right, they fire Robert Saleh, they're all in. All right, they trade for Devontae Adams, they're all in. Hassan Reddick's back, they're all in. How many weeks in a row?
Hassan Reddick's going to be the difference, Trev. Hassan Reddick is going to be the difference.
How many weeks in a row can we be all in? Can we just win a football game here? That's what we're wanting here for the New York Jets. Sort of rumblings about what's going on in New England as well with the coaching staff. Is there too much inexperience there? It's just Gerard Mayo know what he's doing. I think that he does. I think that they're just struggling. And look, nobody likes to lose. And I think people I think there's a disconnect. Mini rant here. Sure. I think that there is a major disconnect with ownership and front offices making what is, I think, the right decision when they do stuff like this and they go, okay. We got to totally rebuild ourselves here. We're going to move on from Belichick. It's going to be a little bit tough. We're going to draft our franchise quarterback this upcoming draft. It's going to take a little bit of time. We're probably not going to be good next year. Might be not great even the year after that. But then 3 years from now, that winning window is really going to hit, and we're really going to be a contending team for hopefully a late playoff run yet again. And then it plays out exactly the way that you thought it was going to. And now all of a sudden we start freaking out about it.
Yeah.
The Patriots are bad. Who knew? Everyone. Literally everyone. Yes. Everyone knew. And I don't know. Again, if things are bad behind the scenes, sure, maybe it needs to get cleaned up a little bit. I just think that losses make people very impatient. and it makes you lose sight of what you got. A quarterback who's playing well. You got a defense that's all right, but obviously, like, you're still multiple pieces away, in my opinion. The offensive line's bad. The wide receivers aren't what they need to be. The run game has been terrible. Like, it's going to be bad, New England. All that to say, I think the Jets' defensive line's got to show up in this game. That's my matchup that matters in this one. Because the Jets' defensive line has not been good this season. It has been one of the most disappointing units, I think, of any team in the NFL. And I understand, they don't have Bryce Huff anymore, and they hadn't had Hassan Reddick, and Jermaine Johnson's out for the year. But still, just as a whole, like, this group has not been good. And the floor of the Jets defensive line should have been a lot higher than what it is right now. I mean, we're talking about a team that is 31st in overall pass in PFF grade for their defensive line at 46.2. Their pass rush grade is 20th in the NFL. I mean, this is a unit that was so much better even just a year ago. And they have a matchup to say, okay, the slide stops here. We're getting back to our dominant ways. Because if they look bad against the Patriots offensive line, which is last in PFF grade, 30th in pass blocking grade, last in run blocking grade, second most pressures allowed in the NFL. Like, if you can't look good against the Patriots, it doesn't matter what Aaron Rodgers says. If this defensive line can't look good against the Patriots, the Jets have no shot at making the playoffs. None.
No.
So that's sort of my matchup that matters here.
That was mine too. It was mine too. Because this is the unit that has the most continuity, that is the unit that you were supposed to rely on. And I get it. You fired your defensive coach, the architect of this defense. There are inevitably going to be things that you take a step back on, but it shouldn't be this big of a step back with all the talent you still have on this roster. And now, you're getting Hassan Reddick back. So, or you're adding Hassan Reddick. I shouldn't even say back because he hasn't played for this team yet. That's the biggest thing. And you have an opportunity to do that against one of the league's worst offensive lines. And if you don't do that, if you don't win this game, then I am out completely on the Jets. I'm not willing necessarily to say that quite yet, given what Aaron Rodgers, even in his last year in Green Bay, I mean, they won 4 of their last 5 games. They were knocked out of the playoffs by a very spiteful Detroit Lions team. But it doesn't change the fact that Aaron Rodgers is still capable of turning it on and scoring a lot of points. So you need to do your part defensively in New York, and that is to prevent points. And again, take advantage of the opportunities that are being placed in front of you. I cannot imagine the storylines that will come out of this if, in fact, the Jets lose to the Patriots. That's just not an option here. So I agree. This is the matchup that matters, in just the fact that this is an opportunity for the Jets to right at least one side of the ball. We're going to see on the offensive side of the ball, because that is what my plus factor goes into, which is, for the second straight week, Davante Adams. Davante Adams.
It needs to be, sure.
It needs to be. I mean, the stuff we heard coming out about kind of the team culture, while it obviously makes sense because teams don't struggle like this with great cultures, seeing Davante Adams come out and say very frankly, like, yeah, I didn't know that if I should speak up or not because I'm the new guy here, but what I saw was completely unacceptable. Like, people aren't even celebrating, teammates aren't even celebrating good plays. He used the example of Breece Hall's, like, down the sideline chunk play run. He's like, nobody was celebrating that on the sideline. And, like, that's when you know things are bad. It's like you can't even get into the good plays. Forget, like, getting down on yourselves because of the bad plays. And so it's not only it's the familiarity between Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers that needs to start paying off right now. And I know, like, I'm not going to expect that out of any other receiver that comes to a new team, but this is different. This was billed to be different. This was sold to everyone as different. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, selling these things that are supposed to be different. SAT prep Aaron Rodgers, apparently, if you saw the interview today, and he used some vocab words.
I saw the tweet about it, but I didn't actually click on the video. What was he just flexing the vocab? Is that what he was doing?
Yeah. There was a couple words in there that you can go and look at that. It's always something, man. But if you're going to sell me this chemistry between him and Davante, it needs to happen right now. So Davante is going to be the plus factor here.
Yeah, my plus factor, I'll go to the other side of things. Ramondre Stevenson, 3 out of the last 4 games he has played, he is graded below a 51.0 rushing grade. Now, it's very difficult, like I said, because his team is last in run blocking grade, so it's tough for running backs to stand out. We at PFF have said for a long time, when it comes to running the ball, obviously there are individual things that running backs can do themselves, but a lot of times they really lean on the guys up front to be able to have good rushing production, good rushing stats, and just be an efficient overall team on the ground. To me, the plus factor has to be Ramondre Stevenson, because for as much as I think Drake May can give you those pop plays, sure, like I've said many times, this for this recap show or this preview show, you need to be able to run the ball. We all love to throw the deep pass. We live in a world where defenses get it now. Like it is now. 3 years ago, sure, let it rip. Defenses are playing in cover one. They got no chance to stop all these deep shots. Like you could hit over the top as much as you want 3 years ago. Doesn't exist now. Every team's playing more too high coverages than basically they ever have over the last half decade. They are limiting what quarterbacks can do. They're telling you that you need to throw it short, and a lot of teams just are not being patient with it. The Patriots, they're getting a lot of good deep production, or I should, not a lot. They're getting good deep production from Drake May. I should just say that without the adjective there. But they need to be able to run the ball as well. And if they can't, I think the Jets are still going to outscore them in this one, even with them being at home. Falcons to the Bucs, next 1 p.m. game. Falcons won in overtime against the Buccaneers a couple of weeks ago. Kirk Cousins passed for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. To me, the matchup that matters is Todd Bowles versus himself, because simply put, this cannot happen again. And I don't know what Todd Bowles is going to do differently this time. I mentioned when we were talking about the Minnesota Vikings that Todd Bowles has blitzed more than any other team in the NFL. 216 times he has blitzed this year. That is more than every single team. Do they still stay aggressive? Are they going to just try to the same game plan really against the Atlanta Falcons and say, okay, but this time we're going to play it better. This time we're in the creamsicles. This time we're at home. This time it's actually going to work. And maybe it will, right? You got Antoine Winfield Jr. back. You've got some guys on the defensive line back. Elijah Cansey is back. So maybe they do think that, hey, we just now have the horses to finish the race this time around, and the game plan will be the same. But to me, it's a Todd Bowles thing, because you're also coming off of a week where they were terrible against the Ravens. They guys wide open everywhere. Todd Monken had Todd Bowles in a blender in that game, and I get it. Lamar Jackson's on the other side. It's tough to contain him, but 41 points as quickly as they were able to get up there, and Bucs started that game off 7-0, and then holy cow, it felt like it was out of hand very quickly after that, and that's the defense. So what does Todd Bowles do here? Is he going to continue to be his aggressive self against the Atlanta Falcons, especially since it did not work just a couple of weeks ago? We will see. What about you? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes along with that. It's the Bucs defensive line in particular against the Atlanta's offensive line, and that's for the reason that I fully expect Todd Bowles to be aggressive. This is who he is. This is what his scheme is. Those blitzes need to get home. Those guys up front need to get pressure because of the fact that you do have injuries on the back level of this, and those got exposed against the Ravens. So you have Jamel Dean that's on IR, and this is something that I feel like the best way to prevent explosive plays, which they have not really been great at doing up until this point, is that blitz, that pressure, everything up front needs to get home. And you do have the horses this time to make that happen. You do have Elijah Cansey next to Vita Vea. You do have Antoine Winfield Jr., who can be a factor in that pass rush. He's not necessarily on the defensive line, I know that. But this is the thing that is the calling card of Todd's defense. And I think what the biggest thing has been, and what they actually did well in that game against the Ravens in the first half, that's the caveat, they shut down Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had a very quiet night that first half. It wasn't until the second half where he broke off that long run and then all hell broke loose. Mm-hmm. But this is how Todd Bowles' defenses are built. They're built to stop the run first, make offenses one-dimensional, and then get home with the blitz when that quarterback starts to hold the ball more and more, trying to get chunk plays. That is the formula for what this defense is. That is the formula that is going to have to work this time. So that if that formula is going to work, I think a lot of it hinges on the defensive line, because that is the strength of your team right now.
My plus factor in this one is Jalen McMillan, their rookie wide receiver. I had a lot of high hopes for Jalen McMillan going into the season. I really liked his tape at Washington over the last 2 years. It felt like he would really fit in well with this team as their wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Well, Now you're wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, basically. And I think that Sterling Shepard's probably going to be the wide receiver 1 just because of what he has shown over the last couple of weeks and his chemistry with Baker Mayfield. But I think they really like Jalen McMillan. And unfortunately for him, it's been a little bit of a struggle here in the early parts of his NFL career. Kind of has been a little bit for all three of these Washington guys. Rome Odunze's had his moments, but Jalen Polk's been really struggling with New England as well. And Jalen McMillan has here in Tampa Bay. 48.2 receiving grade for Jalen McMillan so far this season. He's got 3 drops already and just a 13% threat percentage. Now, when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are in the game, it makes sense why that threat percentage is going to be a little bit lower. So we'll see what it's like moving forward and how much they really trust him and how much Baker Mayfield and Liam Cohen really trust him. But with no Mike Evans for the next couple of weeks, no Chris Godwin for the rest of the season, it's hard to look at this Buccaneers offense and think that they have enough firepower to be there in the end when it comes to winning this division and making a legitimate run in the playoffs, a little bit of like what they did last year. I think the players that hold the key to that, one of them is Jalen McMillan and him really stepping up starting this week. What about you?
Yeah, I had Jalen McMillan and, Trey Palmer kind of has shown flashes over the last couple of years, but I actually think I might switch it up given that we just talked about Jalen. I think this offense now is going to become one of those run first offenses because where's the health of this team now? It's in the offensive backfield. And
Sure.
You saw all 3 of those guys now between Bucky Irving and you saw Rachaad White finally kind of get more involved a little bit. These are the and Sean Tucker. These are the guys that are going to be the ones I think that this offense now runs through. And it's not, I wish I could tell fantasy owners like, oh, well, hitch your horse to these 2 guys or this one guy. I don't think it's going to happen like that. If you look at that game against the Ravens, they got a pretty even split as far as carries go. But I think that that's a huge strength then of this offense is that you don't necessarily know which guy, especially if you trot out more 2-back sets, more of those pro sets in this offense. Can Liam Cohen adjust that as much in this game and give the Atlanta defense multiple runners to contend with? And then we know what Baker Mayfield is capable of on scrambles and kind of getting some more yards himself with his legs. That could make this a truly kind of dynamic run game, which we haven't seen in Tampa, by the way, in years. I've been really encouraged with just how much this run game has improved under Liam Cohen and how much more diversified it's become. I think that that's going to be a huge factor. And so maybe I'm changing my plus factor to just the offensive backfield. And if you can kind of run this offense through them and be productive at the same time.
And I think you're right because you talk about, hey, where are the strengths of this team if the wide receivers are down? Not only is it in the backfield, it's in the offensive line as well. This is a really good offensive line that's really coming together very, very well. And I think they're really understanding how they need to run the ball. And when I say that, I mean, zone blocking scheme plays versus man and gap blocking scheme plays and sort of the chemistry that sort of goes into that because it felt like they were sort of playing with both sides to start the season. Now they're leaning a little bit more towards what they do well, which I think is between the tackle runs. Yeah. These running backs are really responding. We saw the great Sean Tucker game. Bucky Irving's been fantastic. I think Rachaad White certainly is good as an all-around back as well to have a 3-headed monster there for them. So I agree, and we'll see. Maybe we are focusing a little bit too much on how they're going to replace things in the passing game, and we talk about wide receivers they're going to need to step up. Maybe it is them becoming a little bit more of a run-dependent team, which is not a bad thing. Maybe a little bit less explosive, but if you could still impose your will on the ground on your opponents, that can mean a lot. You're going up against a defensive line that has struggled this year in the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll see if that's their game plan and if that really can be the tide that changes here for them. Bengals, Eagles. Last 1 o'clock game that we have here in the early slate. Bengals coming off a win against the Cleveland Browns. The Philadelphia Eagles coming into town as the road team here. What do we think about this one? What's the matchup that matters for you?
Yeah, it's got to be how this Bengals pass defense performs against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who are back to their old ways, despite the fact that also, Saquon went off. That's been kind of the bread and butter of this Philadelphia Eagles offense as these guys, their receivers have been hurt, but their receivers are no longer hurt. So in the way that we were just talking about the Bucs kind of shifting to a run-first offense, this Eagles team can get back to their high-flying ways. You see what I did there?
Birds.
A.J. Brown in single coverage, 98.6 PFF grade, which is tops of the tops among wide receivers. Devontae Smith this season, 33 targets, 25 catches on those targets for over 300 yards, 127 yards after the catch too, which is really funny when you think about the kind of Devontae Smith's size. The fact that he's still fighting for yards and getting those yards after the catch is a really good sign too for Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense. So I'm really going to need these guys to be productive, and that's something that this Bengals team, they have two of the top 15 highest graded cornerbacks when in single coverage in DJ Turner and Dax Hill. So this is again kind of a strength on strength. Who's going to get the better of each other? This Bengals defense has some making up to do, to me and Bengals fans, for the way that they started this season. So this is a really good way to get back on track with a strength of this unit.
I think this is a big time identity game.
Sure.
I think that both of these teams are certainly not exactly where they would want to be, but there's no reason to say that either team is out of it quite yet, even if they haven't played as well as they have wanted to so far this season. But when I say this is an identity game, the first matchup that I'll start with is the Eagles run game versus the Bengals run defense. This is an area where the Eagles need to continue to dominate on the ground, because if they don't, I don't know if they have enough of their intermediate passing game to be good enough to have that be a main identity of their team. Now, the A.J. Brown deep shots has saved them over the last couple of weeks. They need those. They need him healthy and in the lineup. That's always going to exist for them, those shot plays. But the shot plays, once again, need to be complementary of the run game. And I think when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they are top 5 in the league this year just over the last 2 weeks. So I kind of wanted to have a 2-week sample size to talk about what these teams were like going into this game. Last 2 weeks, top 5 in EPA per rush, top 5 in total rushing yards. Saquon Barkley is a big reason why. He's 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards, 5th in yards after contact, 1st in rushes of 30 or more yards, 6th in rushes of 10 or more yards. So he has been totally worth the investment that they gave into him when it came to free agency this past offseason. On the flip side of things, the Bengals defensive line was bad to start the year. Like, this was a unit that we could not talk about enough as one that was letting them down. But over the last 2 weeks, 69.8 run defense grade, 2 highest run defense grades this year. Actually, no, the 69.8 run defense grade was total for the season, and their highest run defense grades have each come over the last 2 weeks, both of those above 70. So they're trending in the right direction there. Do the Bengals have the ability to stop one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL? If they can, I think that is a real sign that the Bengals are turning the page from their woes in the early parts of the season. And then I'll go right into my plus factor with that one. It's the Eagles rookie cornerbacks, because again, I talked about this is a major identity game for both of these teams. We already know some of the things that they do well as a staple, but do the Bengals have what they need to on defense to stop the Eagles rushing attack? And on the other side of things, do the Eagles have the secondary to slow down one of the better passing attacks in the NFL? They played Cooper DeJean in the slot last week, and he performed very, very well. Quinyon Mitchell's been a little up and down, as you would expect from a rookie starter, but he has been good on the outside. Darius Slay has been good as well. They're going up against one of the best passing offenses in the league, and one that is on fire right now with the Cincinnati Bengals. So to me, it's like, okay, are we about to see that it's not just one unit here or there on either side of the ball for either of these teams? Can one of them come out and say, we are a complete team? Because in this matchup, you've got what should be theoretically a strength on a weakness in both instances. And do they rise to the occasion? So I think this is a massive game, not just for a singular win between these two teams, but also what we are going to believe about them moving forward.
Yeah. And if I can go to the other side of the ball for my plus factor, it's this Bengals offensive line, which I feel like this is just kind of an evergreen thing that we talk about year in and year out. And this year, in the beginning of the year, I feel like we felt like things were kind of fixed, and you saw the production that Joe Burrow had with his receivers. But Joe Burrow is inevitably better when he's kept clean. He's got the second best PFF grade, 89.3. When he's kept clean. The only issue is right now, this Bengals offensive line overall has a 61.4 PFF grade, which ranks 28th in the league. And then pass blocking specifically, their grade of 68.5 ranks 20th. So that's not something you necessarily want to see, especially with obviously Joe Burrow's potential to be so incredibly productive. But B, you have Joe Burrow's injury history. And that's something that is a concern every single year. And you want to make sure that Joe Burrow can stay on the field because when he is on the field, he is one of the best quarterbacks this league has to offer. So that they're now going against an Eagles defensive line, which is a really, really good one. Fifth best grade, 74.3. And they've got 91 pressures, which is kind of middle of the pack, but against a team that is struggling against like in pass blocking, I'm worried. I'm a little bit worried. And you have guys like Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter. They're doing wonderful things for this Eagles defensive line. And 23 pressures from Sweat, 21 from Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter has just, I mean, we can talk about stats all we want, but you watch these games and your eyes are just inevitably drawn to Jalen Carter and just how much havoc he's wreaking on the interior of that defensive line in Philadelphia. So this is going to be a huge test for the Bengals offensive line and one that I'm really going to need them to pass.
Let's get into the 4 p.m. games. Before we do that, got to tell people that this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Bundy, the performance drink that is fueling the health-lete revolution. It's natural products that have natural ingredients, which means no added sugar to them, which you love. The tart cherries, they are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. They've got natural anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits, okay? Reduce soreness, increase recovery, naturally helps with sleep, helps boost immunity. It's fantastic stuff. It's really great. I've tried a couple of their different products and they're fantastic. I thought the tart cherries would be way too sour. I thought the drink would be not for me. And that's not the case. It's fantastic. If you live an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, it's got so many great benefits and it's a great thing to have after you are active, whether it's you're training for a marathon, you're doing strength training in the gym, or even if you're just walking around the neighborhood once or twice a day. It's great for you. And used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, used by every single NFL team. Every team that was overseas this year or traveling far outside the country in the Brazil games, the Europe games, they've got Cherry Bundy with them for exactly that, for all the health benefits that are there. Check it out. The products are available over at Amazon and cherrybundy.com, or you can check your local retailers like Publix, Kroger, things like that. See if they've got them there, but if they don't, you can go get them at cherrybundy.com. They've also got, it's not just recovery stuff either. They have stuff that is specifically for sleep to help you sleep. They've got protein drinks as well. So whatever your active lifestyle is demanding of you, Cherry Bundy is going to be there to help you out with it. So check them out over at cherrybundy.com. 4 p.m. games. First one I want to talk about, Saints at Chargers. What's the matchup that matters that you got here for this one, Carmen?
The constant on the Saints offense is Alvin Kamara. And that's what you need to contend against, especially now that he signed this big contract, this new deal.
I don't know how they're doing it.
I don't
where are they getting the money from?
I don't know.
They're $81 million in the red when it comes to salary cap. What are you doing? I love Alvin Kamara as much as the next guy. What are you doing? How are you doing this?
I do not understand it. That was the biggest shock, and not because I didn't think that they wanted to keep Alvin Kamara, but because of, they're in cap hell. The Saints are in cap hell every single year. Like, there is creative accounting, and then there's whatever happens down on the bayou, because this is something that I just do not understand where the money is coming from, how they're shifting around. They literally just do enough to live another day, to live another year after year. It's so stressful.
Dave says in the chat, Mardi Gras is a front for the money for the Saints. Prove me wrong. I can't do it. I can't, Dave.
I can't do it. You're right. That's probably, there's collection tins that go around at Mardi Gras. Is the one that's been there. It's really just for Alvin Kamara's contract.
They're tithing for Alvin Kamara's contract. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to Honestly, derail you. Go ahead.
I mean, the Saints are a religion in New Orleans.
That's true, they are. I
wouldn't be surprised if the tithes are not paid to the Catholic Church in New Orleans and instead they're paid to New Orleans Saints. This went really far off what I was going to say, but it's Alvin Kamara versus this Chargers front seven and how they can contend with everything that Alvin Kamara does. It's not fair to single out whether, are they good against the rush? Are they good against the pass? Alvin Kamara is going to be a factor in both of these things. It's why he's so productive. It's why that this Saints team is productive even with all of the quarterback shuffling and all that other stuff. Alvin Kamara looks back to the guy that we saw, that you and I honestly were so scared of, working in Tampa, all those years ago at this point. At public enemy number one was Alvin Kamara because just of how much he could just unleash um, on especially division teams. Not that that's coming into play here, but how do you stop Alvin Kamara? That is what's going to sway this game for the Chargers. Can they limit his production, especially when he has all of these fun things to be playing for now that he's got the fresh contract?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I agree with you. Alvin Kamara is the talent that you want to run things through. And when it was going well for the Saints in the beginning of the year, we talked about the potent passing attack, but really it was just how they were running the football. But there have been instances since where he has been bottled up pretty well, and I feel like a Chargers defense that is number one in the NFL right now in points allowed per game, they're going to be a group that's going to figure that out. And so I think it's going to have to be a little bit more than that. And then the other side of the ball, the matchup that matters to me is the Saints defensive line versus the Chargers offensive line. Saints only 37 pressures on third and fourth down this season. That's just tied for 23rd in the NFL. It's got to be a lot better when you're going up against a talent like Justin Herbert. Chargers offensive line and pass protection, 53 pressures allowed, which is tied for the 8th fewest. So this is sort of a really good unit versus a really bad unit. Can the Saints mitigate or raise the floor, I should say, of their defensive line, or maybe even raise the ceiling is probably the way that I needed to say it. They got to be able to get after the quarterback a lot better than they have so far this season. It looks like Spencer Rattler is going to play in this game. We're at least 1 week away from Derek Carr making his return. And so it's going to be a tough assignment for Spencer Rattler to go up against a defense that really knows what they're doing, that's coached very, very well. And I think that they've got to be able to get after Justin Herbert if they want to have any chance at all in this game to keep the scoreboard relatively low in that regard. We figure it's probably going to be low for the Saints anyways, because that's how the Chargers defense plays everybody. But the Saints defense has to do their side of things and make sure that the Chargers aren't lighting up the scoreboard themselves, which kind of goes into my plus factor, because the player that I think really needs to step up, or continue to step up, is probably the way to say it, for the Los Angeles Chargers is Ladd McConkey. Most catches on the team, gaining 10 or more yards. He is how this passing attack stays potent. So it's not a super explosive offense for the Chargers, but where they have success, it does typically come from Ladd McConkey. And that's, in my opinion, the way that they're going to have to continue to do things to score enough points to win this game. So I'll say McConkey in this one.
Yeah, I said the same, honestly, because you've been a run-first offense. We know that that was going to happen out of a Jim Harbaugh-led team. But now you need to be more productive out of that. So if it's not going to come via the ground, then you need to get the pass game involved. And by the way, you have a guy like Justin Herbert, who is one of those guys that just looks built in a lab to play quarterback. And we know the capability that he has. Please unleash him a little bit more. I get it. You can still be a run-first offense, but the way that you're going to get chunk plays, the way that you're going to get production, the way that you're going to put points on the board, which is what they've struggled with this year, is through the pass game. And it's certainly, especially against a team that maybe like you haven't done it yet as much. So whatever team you decide to kind of flip the script on, that's going to come as something that they didn't necessarily prepare for. So get Ladd McConkey involved. I really like him. I think he should. I think he's going to be good.
I think he already is good.
Yes.
And clearly, I think when you see the success of the passes 10 or more yards, like, he's the guy who's leading the way. So is he a wide receiver one for this team moving forward? I don't know about that, but he is going to be a really good part of their passing attack moving forward. And I think it could be a stud slot receiver. I think Ladd McConkey can be used in a lot of ways, like what Josh Downs is being used at with the Indianapolis Colts, where a lot of people don't think, oh, I can't build a passing attack around a smaller slot receiver like that. And I don't know. I think you can. So as the Chargers continue to get different, better pass catchers in there over the next couple of years, I think McConkey is going to be a constant there as a slot receiver for them. Bills Seahawks is the next game that I want to get to here. This one's in Seattle. This is a very, very interesting game with two teams that play sort of clashing styles. And I have a matchup that matters, that highlights that a little bit. But Carmen, what is yours? I'm very curious to hear what your matchup that matters is in this game.
Yeah, it's got to be the Bills offensive line, Seattle defensive line. I think it's one of those kind of strength on strength teams, although I don't want to, I know that your matchup has more to do with the back end of Seattle's defense. Phenomenal. But this Bills offensive line has done great this year, allowed Josh Allen to do so many wonderful things. You are allowing for kind of everything in this offense. And whether or not, we have James Cook, that's going to be an issue. But I do think that this offensive line is just very well rounded. And how are they going to do against a Seattle defensive line led by Mike McDonald? We know what he can do as far as being that defensive minded head coach and how stingy that they can be up front. So I'm really interested to see who kind of gets the better of them in this game.
So I definitely think that any matchup in the trenches matter a lot in this one. When I said that this one was stylistically a little bit different, what I was thinking of was sort of what Geno Smith has been this season versus what the Bills like to do on defense. And I'll highlight it in the details by saying Geno Smith has 69 pass attempts at 15 yards or more this season. Number one in the NFL. He passes the ball beyond 15 yards more than anybody. The Bills defense specifically, only 18 passes of 15 more yards allowed this year, and they play two deep safeties, the third most in the NFL. 161 snaps this year they have played with two deep safeties. That is what the Buffalo Bills want to do. They have lost so many times. Unfortunately, I don't mean that as a shot. I mean that they've played in a lot of really big games. They've lost too many times against Joe Burrow, against Patrick Mahomes, against guys that really like to throw the ball deep. And over the last couple of years, they have developed deep coverage safeties, and I use that not as the position label, I use that as the word, so like quite literally. So now they have these two guys deep constantly, and they're forcing quarterbacks to take the underneath stuff, take the over the middle stuff, and just not get beat deep. That's what the Bills are trying to do. That's not Geno Smith's style. That's not what Seattle's offensive style has been so far this season. So who wins? Who wins this matchup here? It's exactly what the Buffalo Bills want you to do, what Geno Smith does naturally. So does Geno say, I don't care, I'm still giving my guys a chance, I'm going to throw it deep down the field? Or does he switch up what he does a little bit, and does he throw the ball a little bit shorter? Do we get a lower average depth of target here from Geno this week? I'm not so sure we're going to get that. Geno is a guy who I think really likes to trust his guys deep. So I think the Seahawks are still going to try to push the ball deep down the field, but they're going up against a coverage unit that is schematically and formation-wise going to be very ready for it. So how successful is that going to be? I think that that's a key part of this matchup. Who's your plus factor in this game?
Yeah, it's going to be Keon Coleman because I know that the Bills now have Amari Cooper. Obviously, there's going to be attention paid to Amari Cooper. So then what can Keon Coleman do while all that attention is being paid to Amari? And he's coming off of a career high 125 receiving yards against Tennessee. Again, I don't think that is a coincidence. I think that is what you get when you add a guy like Amari Cooper that defenses have to respect. So Keon Coleman, he's now leading the team in receiving yards. That's not a surprise given that Amari hasn't been there very long, but I do think that there is an opportunity here now for Keon Coleman to shine when you now have to divvy up the attention you're spending or you're paying to this receiving core in Buffalo. And we all know that Josh Allen, he's now had the benefit of 7 weeks with Keon Coleman as a rookie receiver, but he's gotten to know him a lot more. And I think that there is going to be, I trust Josh Allen to identify the matchups that are, the one-on-one matchups, the more favorable matchups between each of these guys on every down and be really productive and make the right decisions when it comes to who he's throwing the ball to. And I do think that Keon Coleman is going to be a huge factor there.
I'm going to call my shot with this plus factor. You ready for it?
Okay.
It's not necessarily like my plus factor is Devon Witherspoon, and Witherspoon's been playing well this season in single coverage. We got 63 total snaps in single coverage, 8 targets, only 4 catches allowed for 28 yards. I mean, he's really good in single coverage. The reason why I'm bringing him up as a plus factor, he's got no interceptions this year. I think he gets an interception this week. I don't know, just feeling it. Calling my shot. So I think he's the plus factor because I think Devon Witherspoon gets his first interception of the year this week. And if it happens, everybody that watched this show, even if it was for 5 seconds, has to subscribe to the channel. That's what has to happen. Just letting you know. Okay. If Devon Witherspoon gets an interception, you got to subscribe to the channel.
Okay.
Just saying.
I mean, I'm already subscribed, so I don't count, but.
Right. Well, if you're already subscribed, salute. We love you. All right. So Bears Commanders is the next game that we want to go to here. Interesting because, if Jaden Daniels plays, in what capacity is it? And we're obviously recording this on a Thursday. I didn't see that he was ruled. I didn't see that he was ruled out. He's not practicing because why would he practice? You don't want him to practice basically at all whatsoever. You want him to take as much rest as possible before he gets to Sunday and then see how he feels. But you're at home in this one. Bears are coming into town. How do we feel about it? What's the matchup that matters, Carmen?
I had one matchup that mattered, and then I ended up switching it because
All right.
I remembered what happened last time these two teams played, and DJ Moore went off. Like, that's AWF, off.
Okay.
He went for 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. Again, with a different quarterback. I get that. I don't necessarily think one is going to spill over to the other. But at this point, against Washington, DJ Moore has 5 touchdowns, which is the most against any opponent, tied with the Saints, except he's played 5 games against Washington. He's played 10 games against the Saints. So he has the same amount of production in half as many games, 16.1 yards per reception average. Can he continue to do this with Caleb Williams, who, I mean, they went off together against DJ Moore's former team in Carolina, and that's something that they have already established this really good connection. And DJ Moore was telling Chicago reporters even today that he's like, I'm not going to sit up here and pretend like I don't think about the last time I was in Washington and what happened there. So he's like, I'm a little juiced up for it. We're going to see what happens. You know, I'm hoping for the same kind of performance, but you never really know. That is going to be, I think, the biggest thing for the Chicago Bears is who goes off. We've seen that kind of each week. There's a different receiver or offensive weapon that Caleb Williams has kind of connected with. Now he's run the gamut. So now you start back over, and who do you identify as a guy that you want to be the focal point of the offense this week, which is a really good problem to have for the Chicago Bears. And how does that match up with Washington's secondary, who ends up on DJ Moore? I think the receiver and kind of corner combos on both sides of this are kind of the matchups to watch, because that was my one before. And I think that you have Terry McLaurin against the Bears corners, or against Jalen Johnson in particular. That was my initial one. And I think that is going to be just as equally of a sway as to how this game goes.
Terry McLaurin and Jalen Johnson. It's going to be a fun one. Get your popcorn ready, as the saying goes. McLaurin, 331 yards versus single coverage this season. That's number 1 in the NFL. Jalen Johnson, 65.8 PFF grade when in single coverage this year. That's 24th among corners. But let's be real. It's Jalen Johnson. The position is very cyclical anyways. We know that he could come out and absolutely shut down any receiver basically at any time. So I think that's going to be a massive matchup in this one because, yeah, like the statistics say, the Washington offense likes to go through McLaurin, especially in single coverage situations, and we've been asking them to do so, I feel like, over the last 3 to 4 years. Now they have a quarterback that is willing to put the ball his way, and an offensive coordinator that is willing to dial things up and give him the chance to be able to go make those plays in single coverage. So to me, that is big time the matchup that matters, because if you can shut down McLaurin, especially if it's not Jaden Daniels that's out there playing,
right,
this becomes a very advantageous matchup then for the Chicago Bears, in my opinion. So that one means a lot. My plus factor in this one, I'm going to go back to the cornerback well, and I'm not going to call an interception here for him, although he could absolutely get one. I am so impressed with the way that Mike Sainristil is playing this year, and I am so happy that a player of his caliber and talent and just competitiveness went to a coach like Dan Quinn, because it's been up and down for the Commanders coverage group, I think, since the season started, but it has been getting better lately. And I think when you look at Sainristil, people looked at him in the draft and they said, okay, this is only a slot corner. I thought he'd primarily be a slot corner at the NFL level, but he has been playing a lot as a wide corner as well. And I think that is because this coaching staff looks at Sainristil and says, okay, sure, he's going to give up a little bit of length. He's going to give up a little bit of strength because he is just a smaller player, but damn, he is not going to back down from a single fight, no matter how many times we put him out there against the other team's best receiver. And so this maybe shouted as a plus factor is more of a salute to Samerstill and how well he has played through the first half of his rookie season, but also him playing at wide corner, which I did not think was going to be the case. And him in this game, I think if he can really get up in these Bears wide receivers, DJ Moore as one of them, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, like whoever it is, if he can really shut those guys down, especially in single coverage roles, now, again, we're talking about you really evening things out and making life difficult on Caleb Williams. And I think that that's going to be a big time plus factor in this one. So who do you have as your plus factor?
Well, I want to go one thing back to Scary Terry because
Okay.
the reason I had him as my initial matchup that mattered is because I keep talking about how he's quarterback proof, right? Like he has had production no matter who his quarterback has been. He's like actually DJ Moore in that regard. And then when I was kind of just poking around at some of these stats for Terry McLaurin, one jumped out at me, and it's no surprise he leads the league in contested catches. So that's why you saw the fact that he is incredible no matter who the quarterback is, because all you need to do is give him a chance. And that doesn't require a whole lot of accuracy. That doesn't require, he's got a really good catch radius, and he comes down with these balls that even if he's covered, you can still throw it to him. So that's my little ode to Terry McLaurin, ode to Scary Terry. I think what he's doing and has been doing in Washington is incredible. But my plus factor then is we'll see if Jaden Daniels plays. Cliff Kingsbury, though, I haven't heard enough. Like people have mentioned, obviously, that Cliff Kingsbury was Caleb Williams' offensive coordinator at USC, but just the implications that then has for when Caleb Williams goes to Washington, which is his hometown. He's going to be juiced up, to play against his hometown team, but he's facing a guy that understands him in every aspect. And if you don't think that Cliff Kingsbury has been meeting with Dan Quinn this week, telling him the lowdown on Caleb Williams and where to attack him, I've got news for you, man. That's exactly what they've been doing all week. So Cliff Kingsbury was so incredibly complimentary this week when talking about Caleb Williams and just the athlete that he is. But this is a guy that while he knows Caleb Williams' strengths, he knows Caleb Williams' weaknesses too. And this is, Caleb has gotten his sea legs underneath him. He's playing with confidence, but the Bears really haven't had tests when it comes to the offensive side of the ball going against really stingy defenses. And that's going to change this week. The talent still leaves some to be desired. I don't know that I'm a huge believer yet in Washington's defense from a talent perspective, but I do have a lot of faith in Dan Quinn. So that's where this is going to become really, really interesting when you have a guy that understands Caleb Williams across the spectrum in the ear of the guy that's designing a game plan against him.
I wonder if Cliff Kingsbury is going to play scout team quarterback like John Gruden did for Rich Gannon before the Super Bowl. Anybody who's watched I can't remember which one it is. It's one of the videos that they made about the 2002 Super Bowl run that the Buccaneers had. But Gruden, who obviously came over from the Raiders, he was their offense coordinator. And then the very next year, he's the head coach of the Buccaneers. They're playing the Raiders in the Super Bowl. Gruden literally played as the scout team quarterback to try to emulate exactly what Rich Gannon is going to do against the defense, and it really helped him out. So I wonder if Cliff Kingsbury is getting under center or in the shotgun.
I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury is as athletic as you need a guy like playing scout team quarterback Caleb Williams is, but
I don't know. He's in shape guy. He looks a little spry, so I think he can figure it out. I just want, maybe he'll get back there and try to emulate his or give his best Caleb Williams impression. Carolina Panthers at the Denver Broncos. Bryce Young is starting in this game. Andy Dalton was involved in a car accident where he injured his thumb. He's okay, all things considered outside of that. But Bryce Young now starting in this game. So I'm curious, is that the big matchup that matters for you? Are we going to get to that a little bit later? What really do you think is the big matchup that matters?
That we'll get to that in a second because it's Bryce Young, but I have a little twist on it. The matchup that matters to me, though, is then who's in front of Bryce Young, and it's Carolina's offensive line, which is much improved this year, and we've seen that with Andy Dalton especially. But it's going against a Denver defensive line that is so good, so scary, and has been getting pressure better than anyone this year. They have 134 pressures, which is 10 more than the next team, which is the Seattle Seahawks at 124. They're second in sacks with 33. They've got 65 pressures on third and fourth down in particular, which ranks first in the league. This is a really, really good unit, this Denver defensive front. And so Carolina's offensive line is going to get the test of their season against Denver this week. And how well will they fare with Bryce Young behind them, who was already, taking the most sacks of any quarterback. And it wasn't necessarily even on the offensive line. It was that Bryce Young was holding the ball, trying to get through progressions, trying to figure out where to go with the ball. That's where Denver can just eat. So who's going to get the better of them? Is Bryce Young going to come out and be a little bit more decisive, help out his offensive line, or can this offensive line just hold up against what will be the biggest test of their season?
Yeah, I think Carolina's wide receivers as well up against secondary for the Denver Broncos. I think it's just a really good Denver Broncos defense overall. Yes. I think that you're totally right. How their defensive front goes up against the Panthers. The offensive line needs to remain a strength for Carolina, but I think these receivers also really have to step up as well. It felt like over the last year and a few games, those 2 games before he got benched, Bryce just was not comfortable with what NFL Open really is. And I don't think they had a lot of receivers that were making things easy. But, since then, Bryce was benched, it felt like the wide receivers were at least playing a little bit better. You've got the emergence of Jalen Coker, who's been playing better, as well as Xavier Legette, Deontay Johnson. Like, those guys have played better in spurts, I should say. Has Bryce's time not starting allowed him to really sit back and see things a little bit differently? Does he understand sort of what the pocket needs to be? Because it's the same pocket, right? It's the same guys that were blocking for him before for Andy Dalton, and he was watching Andy Dalton play a lot better, especially in those first 2 starts immediately after Bryce was benched. It hasn't been great lately, but how much has he learned, really? And I'm looking at these Carolina wide receivers specifically to really help him out just as much as I think the offensive line's got to help him out as well. So to me, I think that how Carolina plays against this Denver secondary is a big matchup that matters for me. And then the plus factor in this one is just Bryce Young and sort of a little bit more of what I talked about there. It just has to look very different. And, I think the reason why Bryce gets benched is because they were running out of excuses, is it going to be perfect? No, but the bar can't be perfect. It can't be like, okay, now that we have the offensive line exactly how we want it, now that we have the receiving group exactly the way we want it, now we can expect Bryce to play well. No. You draft this guy number 1 overall to play really well when circumstances aren't their best. And they already have an offensive line that's playing pretty well. He's just got to look so much better. And I'm nervous for him. I'm really nervous for Bryce because I wondered if we were going to see him in the NFL again after getting benched after 2 games. Now he has the opportunity to sort of reprove himself here. If he is bad once again, I don't know how much longer he'll be in the NFL if he can continue if he won't play well. Now it's a tough matchup against the Broncos defense, so I'm not saying it's all on this week,
right?
But it's just got to be, to me. What I want to see from Bryce Young, I think what I'm trying to say is look confident, because weeks 1 and week 2, he looked lost. He looked like he had no confidence. He looked like he was not ready for the NFL in year 2.
Right. And
that's how it looked in year 1. And you can kind of brush that off when you're a rookie. You can't really anymore. There are too many even young quarterbacks that play more confidently than Bryce Young played in those first 2 games. He has to look like he belongs in this league. You don't have to win. You don't have to even have the best quarterback performance, but you need to look like you deserve to play in this league. And it did not look like that in week 1 and week 2. And I hope it looks like that for him here this week.
Yeah, no, that's my plus factor. But specifically, I jokingly put Bryce Young's visor. Was it your tweet that was like, I want Bryce Young to come out with the visor?
Yes.
With the
full villain arc.
Full villain arc. I want Bryce Young to go full villain arc. And that boils down to what you were just talking about, though, which is confidence. And in some regards, it's a little bit understandable, the fact that they switched offensive schemes for the second year, in Bryce Young's second year, that he looked lost in the beginning of the season, but he still shouldn't look that lost. And so now you've gotten a chance to sit back on the bench, digest the system a little bit, see it operated by a veteran guy, see kind of the ins and outs of it as a third-party observer and someone that, just it had no pressure on him. So can you bounce back then? Does that give you confidence in the scheme? Do you understand it a little bit more now, getting that different perspective on it? And then can you go out there and operate and make some better decisions and be decisive with the ball and just, yeah, be an NFL quarterback, Bryce Young. I mean, you were taken first overall for a reason. You had confidence at Alabama, which is as close to a pro program as you're going to get in college.
Yep.
Somehow recapture that however you need to. Do that for this game. And like you said, I shouldn't ride all on this, but I don't think that this Andy Dalton injury, when you're talking about a thumb on his throwing hand, I don't know that that's going to be a 1 week thing. So is Bryce Young going to get a couple more weeks out of this, and how he looks over the totality of that is really going to determine, honestly, the rest of his career, which isn't necessarily fair, but you kind of backed yourself into a corner when you are in year 2 and still trying to figure it out.
Last of the afternoon slate of games, the Kansas City Chiefs visiting the Las Vegas Raiders. What do we got? What's the matchup that matters here? Because it doesn't look good for the Raiders. Is there any prayer here, or what are you looking at when you're looking at this game?
No, what I'm looking at is Patrick Mahomes versus the bulletin board. Because this is the game where we're going to find out how it's going to be handled. If you recall, back in preseason, the Raiders took the Kermit Muppet around that was dressed up as Patrick Mahomes with his hair and his jersey, and they made a big joke out of it. And then Patrick
Not
Mahomes
what you want at this point of the season for the Raiders. Not what you want.
Not what you want. You knew, I mean, even at the time, there were someone who was like, this is not going to age well. Like, obviously, that's not going to age well. And sure enough, the Raiders struggling, the Chiefs still getting it done despite not looking like the Chiefs we're used to seeing. But they are the only unbeaten team in the league. And at the time, Patrick was brought that video and asked about that video, and he said it will be handled when it's handled. This is the first opportunity for it to be handled. And if you don't think that that's a guy that manufactures motivation as much as Patrick Mahomes does, as much as Andy Reid does, isn't thinking about that going into this game to just kind of add insult to injury here, you've got these Raiders have another thing coming. The memes will be off the charts.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah. Oh man.
So yeah, not a whole lot of concrete stats there for you, but
no, but that's
just the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are 100% right. Chiefs offensive line versus the Raiders defensive line. That's where I'll go. I genuinely think yours actually matters more than mine, even though I'm going to have stats. And the one stat that you have is one Kermit Muppet dressed up as a Patrick Mahomes jersey.
I'm here.
But what?
I'm here. I can't do a Kermit voice.
Chiefs offensive line. One of the best in the NFL, if not the best. I think they've got a claim to that, although I think the Lions are pretty up there. I would say the Chiefs are a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, and a lot of it comes from those interior trio of guys that are playing really, really well. But 81.0 PFF grade this season, the second in the NFL. Yep. They're first in run blocking grade. They are 16th in pass blocking grade. When you look at the Raiders defensive line, it's a unit that I think needs to just be better overall. Christian Wilkins missed a little bit of time. Tyree Wilson still kind of slow to start here. 63.5 PFF pass rushing grade for this team. That's tied for 22nd in the NFL. They only have 76 pressures as a defensive line. That's tied for 25th in the NFL. That's what worries me here is the one area I think that where you would point to on this Raiders team where you would go, okay, this is an area of strength for them. I don't even think it's stronger than the Chiefs' strength. No. So if the Raiders can't really step it up along the defensive line, this one could get extremely ugly here, especially because the Chiefs have not only motivation, but a new star wide receiver to throw the ball to here with DeAndre Hopkins, who I see as both of our plus factors here in this game. Talk to me about DeAndre Hopkins and sort of what you're expecting from him here.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that Sky Moore now is out for the Chiefs. They just kind of keep taking hits along their receiving core, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, they needed some help before that even happened. So now you figure DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a focal point of this offense, and trying to get the ball to him is going to be Patrick Mahomes' number one priority here. And like I said, they've been getting it done regardless. I've kind of I guess hyperbolically or jokingly, I've been like, not only do I have more faith in the Chiefs to three-peat this year than I ever have, but they may not lose a game at this point. And so now you add a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who is just so good at those kind of contested catches, at the production that he's been able to have in his career. I realize he's a little bit older now, and we haven't seen that from him, but we also haven't seen Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball. So what is that going to look like? Are you going to kind of be able to just loft it up to DeAndre Hopkins in the way that you used to be, 3-4 years ago, and him come down with it? Versus single coverage in his career, or this year, 7 targets, 4 catches for 43 yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 3 catches gaining a first down. So he's one of those clutch guys. Is he going to be one of the ones to move the sticks for this Kansas City offense? If I trust anyone, like I said, I trust Patrick Mahomes, I trust Andy Reid, even I trust Matt Nagy in Kansas City.
I think it's hard to not to at this point. Look, I think that Hopkins is the plus factor for me as well, specifically in the red zone. When you look at the Chiefs, 47.8% touchdown conversion percentage in the red zone this year. That is 25th in the NFL. When you look at DeAndre Hopkins, 3 out of the last 5 years, he has earned a receiving grade above 77, specifically in the red zone. Now, this is one of those years so far where it is not above 77, but like we talked about with the Titans, like we have talked about in weeks prior, their passing attack isn't exactly potent. So I would think that we're going to get a much better version of DeAndre Hopkins than we have even seen this year here now with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think specifically, it's going to be in the red zone where we really see the return on investment for this trade shine. I don't think that Hopkins, even with as much as they might love for him to be, I don't think he's going to be this multi-100-yard receiver in like 3-4 games in a row or 150 yards receiver. Like, I don't think he's going to be that version of DeAndre Hopkins anymore, but it's just specifically scoring 7 instead of 3 or even 7 instead of 0 when we get into the red zone. That's where I really think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a major difference maker. Our research guy, Dave Solfaro, threw this stat out at me, and it doesn't really have to do with what we're talking about, but it's incredible, so I want to read it. Chiefs has not allowed more than 27 points in a single game since Super Bowl 57. That's not last year's Super Bowl.
No.
That's the year before. 27 straight games. They have not allowed more than 27 points. Steve Spagnuolo has this group playing extremely well. We didn't even talk about that there, but I think it's because we have talked about it.
Yeah,
we've talked about it so many
for
times.
Bringing that up, honestly, because that's something that goes completely overlooked, is just how good this defense is, and how this defense is the reason that the Chiefs have had so much success, and why they have the luxury to not be as productive on offense. Or, I mean, they're still as efficient as they've ever been, but at least productive. The Chiefs defense is the reason for that.
We're going to get into the primetime games, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, to round things out. But before we get there, it promises to be a month of tricks, right? Treats, and of course, touchdowns. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet on touchdowns this season. On the ground, in the air, special teams, defense, don't care how they score them, right? We just want to bet on the touchdowns. That's what we want. That's what we're talking about here. DraftKings Sportsbook, it's the #1 place to bet on those touchdowns this season. If you're ready to place your first bet, try bet on something very simple. Like, it could just be to score a touchdown. We just talked about DeAndre Hopkins. If you think that it is just destiny that DeAndre Hopkins is going to score his first touchdown this week against the Raiders in his first game with the Kansas City Chiefs, boom, there you go. If you are a new DraftKings customer, you bet just $5 on any touchdown bet, you get 200 in bonus bets instantly. You can score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the promo code PFF. It's promo code PFF to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY, or you can just text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, visit dkng.co/FTBALL. Cowboys-Niners is a Sunday Night Football game. Niners reeling off of a loss, and Cowboys really just trying to get their season on the right track here, it feels like. Matchup that matters, Carmen. What do we got for Sunday Night Football here?
This seems to be becoming an evergreen matchup when playing the Dallas Cowboys, and it is Jordan Mason versus this Dallas rushing defense, because it has been absolutely abysmal up until this point, allowing just stupid amounts of yards to multiple opponents. They have the most EPA per play allowed on the ground, 42.1 run defense grade, which is the worst in the league. This is the 49ers bread and butter, even without Christian McCaffrey, although I guess we might actually end up seeing him somewhat soon after the bye week. We'll see. But for now, it's Jordan Mason. He has been still productive within this Kyle Shanahan team, even though they're reeling off of the loss they just took this last week. That still shouldn't change given who Shanahan is and what he likes to do, which is run those pro sets, the two-back sets, and do a lot of really fun things, dynamic things with the ground game. And that's just something that Dallas has been absolutely terrible at.
Brandon Ayuk's out for the year. They're going to have to lean on other people in the passing game. Brock Purdy did not have a good game last week.
No.
But I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters because the Niners are very okay with running the football.
Sure.
82.3 rushing grade this season. That's still top 10 in the NFL. And the Cowboys, like you just mentioned, dead last in EPA per rush allowed, dead last in team run defense grade. It's just a recipe where Jordan Mason could have 40 carries this game. And Kyle Shanahan could go, fine, whatever. We're going to win the football game. Doesn't matter. And it's hard to bet that hard against certain trends and what we have seen through 7 weeks of the season. And I don't think the Cowboys have been as bad defending the run as of late, but it's still a group that really struggles to do so. And they're going up against a team that is now going to be desperate to run the ball very, very well. So I think that is just what the 49ers are going to do all game. And it's going to be tough, even from a volume perspective. Even if the Cowboys can play a little bit better, they're going to have to defend the run so much in this game, especially with this being in San Francisco. It's just really hard for me to think that the Niners are going to be beat on the scoreboard, even with this kind of a script. What about plus factor? What do you have in this game?
Yeah, it goes along with that, and it's particularly Kyle Shanahan's window dressing. The different things, he doesn't do a whole lot of different concepts at their base, but he does it in different ways, and that's what he is so incredibly good at. That's why this run game is so incredibly dynamic, just the different looks it's going to give you and the different motions and all of that fun stuff. And this is where the Cowboys' discipline is going to come into play, or should I say lack thereof, given the fact that the Cowboys are the fourth highest missed tackle percentage in the league this year. They have the fewest tackles going for a loss or no gain. And that's also in the run game. It's overall, and then it's also against the run. So the Cowboys have been extremely undisciplined when it comes to tackling and being able to bring runners down, bring anybody down really, because these are kind of overarching stats. And that's what I think Kyle Shanahan is really, really good at doing, is kind of testing your eye discipline and trying to move guys around and get guys out of position defensively. And that's something that I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to fall into the trap of.
I think the plus factor has to be Dak Prescott. Basically because, like I just said, it has to be. Dak has not been what he was last year as a MVP candidate, and I think the floor has been a lot lower for Dak Prescott this season. 10 big-time throws, 13 turnover-worthy plays. He just does not look as sharp, and I think the team overall, they're not in a groove. The vibes aren't what they needed to be. We knew the run game was going to be bad. We knew the offensive line was going to take a bit of a step back, but I feel like it's even worse than we thought it would be, because I felt as though, okay, even if that's going to be the case, the passing game is still going to be great. It's still going to be CeeDee Lamb. It's still going to be Dak Prescott, and they are struggling overall. I think the offense just overall is not, it's not as explosive as it needs to be. There's no one else
besides CeeDee Lamb.
Well, I guess I shouldn't say not as explosive as it should be, because I still feel like the Cowboys are near, top 5, if not top 10 in the league when it comes to explosive plays. So they're still doing that. But like you just said, there's nobody really else other than CeeDee Lamb to throw the ball to. And I think there's a lot of frustrations on the offensive side of the football. And they really need to get it figured out. This is a really tough game to ask them to get it figured out. But to me, Dak really snapping back into form and raising his floor as well as his ceiling would be a very welcome sight for Cowboys fans. It's something that they would need, I think, if they're going to get this upset win on the road here in San Francisco. Final game, it's the New York Giants visiting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh hosting a primetime game for the second week in a row. We've got Russell Wilson starting once again for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Earlier this week, it seemed that John Mara, the owner of the New York Giants, giving Joe Shane, their general manager, and Brian Daboll, their head coach, sort of a vote of confidence, like, no, we're not making any changes. I mean, we'll see if that sticks at the end of the year, but it looks like these guys aren't necessarily coaching for their jobs, so there's that less pressure there. What do we think about this game? Matchup that matters here on Monday Night Football. What do you got, Carmen?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Malik Neighbors and Joey Porter Jr. handle each other because it's a really fun matchup between two young players. Malik Neighbors, top 10 in PFF grade among wide receivers. The biggest thing, 23 catches, gaining a first down. So he's obviously the safety net for Daniel Jones there. He's got 9 catches, gaining 15 or more yards. And he's got 230 yards total versus single coverage. You look at Joey Porter Jr.'s stats in single coverage, 64 snaps, 14 targets, 9 catches allowed on those targets for 137 yards, 7 catches allowed for a first down, but he does have an interception and 2 forced incompletions in situations like that. So how these two go up against each other, I think is going to be fun. And I also think that it's going to matter a great deal into how this game goes for both teams.
I like that matchup.
I know,
it's going to be
fun.
feisty.
It is.
That one's going to be fun.
So fun.
That's going to be fun. Giants offensive line versus Steelers defensive line.
Sure.
Thoughts and prayers to the Giants offensive line, truly, because especially without Andrew Thomas, this one looks rough. 54.4 blocking grade from this team in week 7, 37.4 run blocking grade in particular last week. They're going up against the Steelers defensive line that is many things with J.J. Watt and with Cam Hayward and with the rest of their edge rushers and Keanu Benton and Nick Herbig and Alex Highsmith. Like that whole unit is just, it's fierce. They have the 3rd best run defense grade in the NFL for a defensive front at 73.3. They've got 2 defensive player of the year candidates in TJ Watt and Cam Hayward. And it's just
35-year-old Cam Hayward, by the way.
Yeah, this is true. It's hard to think the Giants are going to do anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Giants score more than 10 points in this game. And the way that they do is Malik Neighbors absolutely goes off. If Malik Neighbors can get more than 150, 175 yards receiving, yeah, maybe we're having a different story. But outside of that, man, it's just a terrible matchup for the Giants. Terrible matchup for the Giants. Their only hope really is that their defense can really contain the Steelers offense. And my plus factor in that one has to be Deonte Banks because Banks, not really great, played the most coverage snaps of any corner for the Giants so far this season, 57.1. I think it'll be a combination between him and Drew Phillips about who's going to go up against George Pickens. But man, it looked like there was at least one play where Deonte Banks just did not give a shit and just gave up on the play mid-play. And it's like, dude, come on. And so I get that things aren't going well in New York, but it's you need better than that from your top corner. And so who Deonte Banks wants to be for this team as their top corner, I think is going to mean a lot because if he can help shut down George Pickens, even with me saying, I don't know if the Giants score more than 10 points in this game, you have a shot in this one because there's not much of an offense outside of George Pickens in the passing game for this team. We'll see if Russell Wilson can diversify it a little bit more, but Deonte Banks has to play well in this game. Or, again, for me, it's Malik Neighbors, Deonte Banks, they're the only chance the Giants have in this game, in my opinion. So,
yeah. Well, my plus factor is, again, Russell Wilson, because he came out and gave this team the spark that it needed in Pittsburgh last week. And not only was he the spark, but he looked comfortable in all different levels of the offense. And this was a guy that he was pushing the ball down the field. 2 of 3 on 20 or more yard throws, 82 yards, 3rd and 4th down passing. He did well, 5 of 11, 85 yards, 1 touchdown. 4 of his completions gained a first down. This is a guy that was pushing the ball down the field. He looked, I'm not going to quite say like the old Russell Wilson, but he was also maneuvering the pocket really well and kind of throwing on the run. And he wasn't afraid to do any of that. And he was accurate when he was doing it. He got off to kind of a rough start, but he shook that rust off so incredibly quickly. And he looked really, really good in this system in Pittsburgh. So can that continue? And if it does, yeah, I mean, I struggle to think how much of a shot, sorry, Giants fans, I struggle to think how much of a shot they have.
I thought Russ looked good. I really did.
I did too.
I had the quote that maybe people took the wrong way, but hopefully they didn't. I understand why Mike Tomlin made the change when I saw Russell Wilson last week. And that's nothing against Justin Fields, but it is more towards Mike Tomlin's point of I need to find out what I have in both of these quarterbacks.
Right.
And very clearly, Russ was giving you something that Fields wasn't, and that is touch passes. And those passes that have a ton of different air yards under them. And so with Fields, it's like Fields is playing great, but Fields is just a fastball thrower. And so he wanted to see which the best version, what quarterback yielded the best version of his offense. And I actually really like the fact that we're getting to see Russell Wilson a little bit here. We will see what version of Russell Wilson we get this weekend, or this week, I should say, on Monday Night Football. There we go. No bye weeks. So it is 16 up, 16 down here for this preview show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching and listening to this one, a little bit of an extended version of the preview show here on the NFL show. Go follow all of Carmen's great work, everything that she does over at Fox Sports. If you guys don't have a PFF Plus subscription, now is a great time to do so. Go over to pff.com, get you that. You can see all the premium stats. You can see the in-game analysis and the in-game grades that we are doing as well when you get that PFF Plus subscription. So that's a cool thing to do, to follow along on a Sunday while everything's going on. If you got your game pulled up, you got Red Zone pulled up, you can also have pff.com pulled up, and you can see all the grades as they are pouring in as the games are going on. For Trevor, Sikkema, and Carmen Vitali, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL podcast. We will see you to preview week 9, same time next week. See you then.
Bye, guys.